Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren, Director of Strategy and Customer Success at Jumpmind. We are a modern POS software provider. And today we have a really fun conversation. We're talking about human-centric retail, which is all around how to design store experiences that truly serve both shoppers and associates. I'm joined today by three amazing leaders, global retail leaders Martin Urrutia and Lesley Hawkins, as well as Lacey Picazo, CEO at ZoCo design firm. So I'd love if we could just sort of go round table and each of you can introduce yourselves a bit. Maybe start with you, Lacey.
Awesome. Hi there. I'm Lacey Picazo. I'm the CEO of ZoCo. I am a nerd for behavior science and its intersections with technology. That is what my studio at ZoCo does. We help our partners and clients better understand all the different humans they serve. To your point, Lauren, whether those are actually your customers and consumers or if it's your associates, what have you. We help our partners understand what's driving their behavior today. What are their motivations? What are their incentives? Why are they deciding to do what they do? And we take that knowledge and try and figure out, okay, like how could we actually serve, evolve, and adapt that behavior? Is there a technology solution? How can we give this person a different experience so that, their behavior might shift in a way that's good for the business? And so that's our experience and where we put our focus.
Lesley.
Hi, thank you so much. Lacey, I love the idea of consumer behavior. I could totally geek out on that. So my name is Lesley Hawkins, and I'm a former head of retail for Adidas Canada. I have spent my entire career in the sporting goods industry, either on the wholesale or on the retail side. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation and talking about the associates and consumers and what human-centric design actually means.
Absolutely. So nice to meet you all. Hi, everyone. Martin, happy to be here. And speaking about my passion, that is retail. I currently lead the global retail experience team and a global toy leader. Love, how we can bring that experience into stores based in Denmark. And what you were saying is so aligned. I believe that now at this time, retail is here to offer memorable experience through the excitement and the activations that we do, but also through the store associates. And there is so many things that we can do when you bring it together. So looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, everyone, thank you again so much for joining. I want to kick things off with our first question, and this is going to be for all three of you, just to kind of level set on what exactly we mean by human-centric retail design. I imagine with your experiences, you kind of have a little bit of a different flavor around what that actually means. So my question is, when you think of human-centric retail design, what does that mean to each of you in your role?
Hey, I'll jump in first. How about that? So for me, human-centric design means actually designing the space for and with the people that really bring the brand to life every day, which is the store associates. And I would say traditionally, we've been building stores through the lens of the consumer first, and rightfully so. They're the ones that actually do drive the business. But for us, the in-store experience starts long before actually a consumer crosses the threshold. So for me, human-centric design for the store associate means looking at all the details of lighting in the back of house, having a space in the break rooms where they could actually recharge. It's not just a small table and chair, that there's collaboration spaces that ease training. It's cushioned flooring at the checkout. It's how do you set up the store so that there's really good inventory flow from the back of house to the front of house, and taking a bit of a different lens of looking through the eyes of the store associate, how they're experiencing it, because I think ultimately that impacts how the consumer will experience it as well.
I'd love to build on what Lesley just said. I think thinking about the people who are actually serving your customer can frequently be an area that gets underserved when it creates the entirety of the experience. But going back to your question, absolutely. It's like thinking about all these people, consumers, associates, other parties, and involving them in how you make decisions because you want to learn from them. You want to involve them in evaluation. You need to understand what's going on in their minds and hearts. and then be willing to change your strategy, tactics, what bets you're placing based on what you learned from them. So being really human centered also means you have to leave room for learning, for iteration, and for growth versus saying, hey, we think this is what we're going to build. Let's just put all of our chips on black, ship it and see, right? Like, because that doesn't actually leave room to involve people more iteratively. In my role, that translates to literally every decision you make. But like, I think the common misconception is, hey, human centered design, we do it because it feels good. It's the right thing to do. And that's true. And I do agree with that. But like the reality is when you actually involve people in these decisions and you can optimize the experience for them, you're going to be able to move those people. And therefore, you're going to be able to move the metrics that you care about as a business. And the last thing I'll say is like being human centered, it can't be lip service. Like, I think retail is a space where people talk about customer centricity, about associate centricity a lot, but it's not a survey. It's not an NPS, right? It's not like getting some data on how people are behaving. Like, it's truly inclusion and involving these people in your strategy, which I think is the big difference.
Absolutely, and I think you say it very well, both of you. And I will just reinforce and maybe add a couple of points because it's about the store associates, right? We are humans. We interact with humans, and the human experience, one to one, at least to me, and what I've seen in my career, is what creates that connection, that emotional connection to the store. Maybe adding to your points, when I look into the experiences that we're gonna bring to life in the store, it's of course making sure that we enable the store associates to interact with the guests through icebreakers, play experiences, connections. But at the end, what we want to do is to make sure that we create that that emotional link that will bring you. So human centered design to me, it's actually how do we create that tear in the eye, that memory that will stay forever, that essence that will recall you that you've been in that shop, in that product, and trigger all those multisensorial moments into one place. And that's how you create loyalty, a return visit. You have something to share. Even you didn't purchase anything that day, you had such a great time browsing, connecting with the teams, that you felt that you were in a good place. You felt that you were in a place where you belong in a community. And then if you put it all that together back to the store associates, if our visitors have a great day, then our store associates are going to have an amazing day at work. So it comes all together into one equation, I think, as well.
I love that we've talked about everything from like the lighting, which is funny because I love research. When I was an analyst and we would ask questions, what do you care about when it comes to the store? We would ask this to consumers and associates. Lighting, organization were always at the top. And there were so many other things too, including like the things that create that sensory experience, too, Martin, that you were discussing. So it's like it really interesting to think about like that foundational table stakes stuff that all the way up to the sensory experiences. And then Lacey, as you said, you need to have the flexibility to take into an account changes, and how consumers are feeling differently about things, how their purchasing is rapidly changing and maybe becoming more digitally influenced. So it's really interesting to dig into. My next question, another one for the whole group. Again, please just jump in. Thinking about the technology piece, where do you think human-centric tech design specifically fits into all of this?
I'll jump in. I would say that technology isn't really a back end function anymore. It's so visible to the consumer all the time. It's part of their shopping journey. And it's also part of the day in the life of every retail associate. And whether it's walking around with a handheld tablet, I think where there's opportunity is how do you take the tech and really humanize it and it add value to the experience. So loyal customers. So at Adidas, we had Addy Club members. It was how do we use the technology to better understand what that member's preferences are? Where have they bought before? What are their previous transactions? What are they interested in? We have all of that data in an online platform through our e-commerce, but how do you bring that down into retail? And then how does that get used by the associates? And ultimately, if we could use that tech to really curate recommendations for the consumer then it works for both the associate and the consumer. And I think the goal of tech needs to be really amplifying that human connection, not replacing it. And I mean, up here in Canada, we've seen through the grocery business that they've moved to a lot of tech-enabled checkout so that there's no human interaction. And in actual fact, it has skyrocketed theft, and it's removed that human connection. And I think tech just needs to be really careful that it's additive. And then in some cases, it's so seamless and intuitive that it improves the consumer experience and the associate experience and doesn't take away from it.
My favorite part of what you said, Lesley, is like this is part of a service journey, right? Like if we're talking about technology, like you have to understand where in somebody's journey this fits in and how it's actually useful, usable or not. Most of my career has been spent in tech, and the reality is technology is expensive, right? Like you're making big bets if you're saying, hey, we're going to deploy this new solution for our associates, for our customers, whoever. And the other thing I've seen in technology that happens often is you can launch something that you are assuming is going to save the day, and it can easily fail or not be adopted as planned, right? If people just aren't using it the way you would anticipate. And I think that happens a lot because we as the people making those decisions, we can assume we know, right? Okay, this is the thing, and clearly it'll fit because it's here to solve this problem. But if we're not thinking about the person's journey more holistically, about what they're trying to do and achieve, what friction or barriers they might have, this thing might fizzle. It might not meet its potential, even if it has amazing capabilities. And so initiating new technology without having that full understanding of the people that you're affecting, the experiences it affects, like that can be a challenge. And I think that's really what we're here to talk about today, right? Because involving like more human centricity in your process to make these decisions, like that's the way you can actually see around corners, where you can predict, hey, if I launch this, this is what people might do or might not do. Here's how I could influence their decisions and behavior. What are the roadblocks going to be to them adopting this new thing, or what barriers they might have, so we can plan around it. And so this is like the great intersection, right, of involving technology with humans who are working in real spaces and are trying to initiate goals along a different sort of journey.
Absolutely, and it's incredible just to build in what you were just both of you saying, right? Because so aligned. I will just maybe add a couple of maybe 3 points to this question, Lorraine. So first of all, I believe retail is a human business. It's humans interacting with humans. It's a social space, and tech right now, you never know, 20, 100, or any other times that will come in the future if that changes. But today it's a human to human business, and tech is an enabler, it's a facilitator, it's a tool that will amplify that relationship, right? In my experiences, when you actually give the store associate a tablet to look for inventory recommendations, but it's not replacing them. So you need to train them and make sure that is something that they could bring as a tool or a superpower that will enable them to be more informed when they speak to the guest, but not replacing. Also, making sure that the tech is very, very clear on the role that will play in that journey or experience map. Because very often, and again, we all have tried different things. I end up seeing that tech somehow has been push or force, and it doesn't fit in the journey, right? It looks like it's a gimmick. So you're browsing something very nice, you're testing your skincare, makeup, clothing, whatever, and suddenly you have a tool that is difficult to understand what is the role of the tool, and in your human behavior and touch, how will you interact with that? So I will say let's keep humans at the center, but also making sure that the best technology, the best digital tools are there to enable them to do an amazing job in front of other humans that they're coming there for a social or a family moment.
If we find that so much of it is also, because I agree with all of you, and we also find that just reliability has to be a baseline for adoption and really trust in the tool. Associates need to know that when they go to use it, it's going to work. And if there's a period where it's not working, it's not consistent, they're having troubles, we find those things just get shelved. It goes in a drawer somewhere, never to be seen again. or if it's a tool that's intended for customer engagement to upsell, they're just not going to want to use it. And so all of these topics of how do you empower, associates with these tools, there's so many big questions you have to ask before that, again, to really understand the problem you're solving, involving your associates, bringing them to the table. I don't know that that's something every, brand or retailer is comfortable with, because that's its own can of worms once you say, hey, do you like this? What are your ideas? But again, just having those conversations, that's something that we get to hear about and be a part of at Jumpmind. It's really great to see businesses moving in that direction, of at least thinking about how to incorporate your users kind of earlier in the process.
Yeah. I always say, Lauren, that technology is only good when it's working. And I can only imagine, if you walk around many back of houses in retail, how many digital tools are sitting there that are in moths, right? Mothballs, because they didn't get adopted by the associates because they didn't work or it wasn't delivering exactly what you want. So back to Lacey's point at the beginning, it needs to be adopted and it needs to be really easy to use and with a real insight into, okay, what is this going to do for the consumer journey? And then what's it going to do for the associate? And if it's just additive with no value, I think then that's where it ends up in the back of house, not ever being used. And it's a huge investment.
Exactly. And so this kind of leads me to my next question, which I think really is probably geared towards you, Lacey. At ZoCo, how do you really build for those more flexible store moments? Maybe you're partnering with a brand or a retailer and they have these big goals. They want to be human-centric and think about the associate. How do you work with them to kind of help them get
Yeah.
onto that
Let me
path?
start with talking about the importance of flexibility. I think a lot of times if we're talking about customer journey and associate journey, we naturally want to put it in stages and say this happens and then this happens and then this happens. But the reality is there's no human-centered journey that's truly linear and predictable to say this in this order and it gets influenced by this moment in time. It's no. The reason they didn't check out of your cart probably has nothing to do with that exact experience. It's something else that happened in a different moment. And I say all of that to say, you have to build for flexibility because it isn't as predictable as step 1 to 2 to 3. And so I think if a retailer is deploying something new, whether that's an experiment, a seasonal event, they're going to test out new traffic patterns, you have to be able to almost use your storefront as a dynamic lab, right? To be able to adapt rather than say, oh, we're going to make this huge change and this big bet and hopefully it sticks, right? So thinking about how you can actually create flexibility is really important because otherwise you can't learn from people. You don't give yourself room to see, oh, people aren't using that as expected. What else could I try? Or what could I shift? Or what small changes could I make to see if it gets better adopted, better received? But I would actually like to give some kudos to Jumpmind and talk about something that you all do very, very well, Lauren, as it relates to thinking about flexibility. When I think about your product for the associate experience, you enable that associate to have high flexibility between a bunch of tasks. And I think oftentimes technology that does many things can feel overwhelming. It can feel gosh, how do I even use this? It does 28 things. I have too many tabs open in my brain already. I can't take on one more. But you could tell how much you've spent time with associates to understand their workflows, understand their jobs to be done. And to the great points Martin and Lesley have brought up, they're trying to facilitate a very human connective experience. Their role and job to be done isn't about technology, but the technology enables flexibility between the many different tasks they have. If they're starting the sale, checking a reward, checking for store pickups, your tool enables how do I have the data at my fingertips I need in this moment without necessarily overwhelming me with a million things, which I believe enables a much more human experience because it creates room for that adaptability. So I think that's the technology that wins, especially in an environment as human as retail, is how do you fit the needs of the moment, but know that that moment isn't hyper predictable because it's not linear. So how do you enable all that adaptability?
Lacey, I love that. My next question, I think this is for more Martin and Lesley. Could you tell us a bit about, are you seeing flexible tech-powered spaces change the way these store associates interact with customers. I think Lacey really laid the groundwork there. And again, from a Jumpmind perspective, this is always our goal too. But how are you seeing that customer to associate interaction benefit maybe from flexible tech, or maybe even ways where we have additional opportunities to continue making it better?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, first of all, tech should allow these store associates to have an easier or less, less pressure day, right? So when you receive the goods, when they come in, when they need to control different planograms and set up visual merchandising, the digital and tech should allow them to have an easier start of the day and take some of that pressure away, so they will have more energy and time to interact with the guests, right? Sometimes they spend so much time dealing with this admin task and back of house that is difficult for them to find the time or the energy to actually come and service the customers, that's their main job. So that's the first part. But I personally believe that tech should be something that they feel comfortable on using. They are feel very comfortable on bringing in front of the guests, and they know well how to use it. They've been trained, they've been prepared, they know it up and down. So they should not be shy on having that in front, but always as a support. So the role of tech definitely is now more and more part of the daily life in a store associate. But also, let's not forget about the daily task that is actually taking their energy and their motivation when they need to spend so much time doing that. So I think is that the combination and tech needs to cover that, downstream with the upstream as they start meeting with people across the different touch points.
Agreed.
Maybe with an angle also on omni-channel, so the journey doesn't end there. So how do could use technology to blend the two worlds, and maybe tell them that they could order from home, or they could send that to a different destination. So yeah, lot of opportunities with tech and digital, as long as we continue to have the human controlling and enabling and being the face in front of the guests.
Yeah, exactly. Retail is a relationship business. And so the role of tech and the flexible spaces allow the associate and the consumer to do what I call like shoulder to shoulder selling, right? That they're right next to each other, and that the tech allows them to be super flexible, mobile. They can find product faster. In our world, it's finding sizing, alternate colors, check out faster, add more units to their transaction, hopefully. And for me personally, I'm a big fan of actually removing the cash wrap as much as possible, because I find truly impressive retail when it's really focused on the relationship without that barrier between. It actually moves it from being transactional to a far more relational. And that absolutely changes the way that associates interact with consumers. I think consumers appreciate it better. And I mean, we certainly see that customization, personalization, knowing who I am, it's more and more important to consumers every day. So having these flexible tech-powered abilities and spaces for these associates to interact with customers, honestly, it's a not only just table stakes, but it's absolutely paramount to the growth of retail.
As you're talking, I'm thinking, words like comfort. Like, how do we bring comfort to these new tools? And maybe some associates feel like they're being replaced because there's stories out there in the market like, oh, they just want to streamline or maybe replace me with tools. And so it is so important to think about, no, how are we helping them to feel comfortable and prepared, and like that they are very much, the most important part of that customer interaction. And I'm thinking, with that as one part of the conversation, but also just how rapidly changing technology is, and there's new sort of trends out there in the market. Is it useful to think about generational differences um, as part of this conversation, or how are you thinking about that? Kind of threw that question out there, and
I know, it wasn't in our show
so
notes. No. We've
I
actually
know.
done a
I'm
lot of
sorry.
generational research for some of the big four consultants, so I can share a little bit on this. I mean, there absolutely are generational differences in what people value and what they believe, and what their challenges and opportunities are. But I think like knowing what that means for your specific customer set and your specific segments of customer that you serve and that you're most connected to is really important because we can easily make generalizations about like, hey, Gen Z is this way, Gen Alpha is this way, and this is how we serve them. And they don't always hold up. Like, it's not binary. Like there's a lot of nuance. And so there are actually a lot of things that I would say folks believe that are in newspapers about Gen Z, and this is how they always show up in retail that like actually aren't not only aren't always true, but like frequently aren't true. It just depends on the environment that they're served within. And so I would say there's absolutely generational differences. I think one that does hold true in a bigger way is like typically younger generations are more fragmented in like how they want to serve a goal in their experiences. A lot of my work in history has been in healthcare, and like in different generations, folks would say like, "Oh, I'm going to this healthcare system for most of my care, whether it's, like whatever, whether it's dental needs or childcare needs or whatever. I'm getting my pediatrician all through this hospital system." But younger generations don't do that. Like they are not loyal to a hospital system the same way, and so they're much more likely to say, "Oh, like maybe I would deliver a baby at this like local hospital system because it's close." But actually, like I have an acupuncturist and a dietitian, and I also get my blood work done over here, and I'm going to find the best this and this and this for myself. And so you actually have like this consumer at the center where even a giant EMR can't serve and understand their whole data because it's so fragmented and fractured in all these places. And I bring that up even though we're not talking about healthcare, like it is similar in how younger generations are more likely to advocate for themselves and to find like, oh, I don't have to go all through here because it's convenient. Like I might get these needs met in a whole bunch of different places, and they're less likely to have brand loyalty if they don't feel like they're being served to the very specificity of their needs.
Puts enormous pressure on brands and retailers to get it right, doesn't it? Especially with, again, that digital component, knowing that your customers are going online first, to look at reviews, see what's available, coming into the store, fully informed with all this knowledge. And so I imagine it's even more important than ever for the associate, again, to have the tools, to have the access to help. So we've talked a lot about, I think, again, what's working today. So looking ahead, if you had your crystal ball, what's one thing you think will define the next era of brick and mortar retail? Right. Simple question. And that could be a design principle, a tech capability you think is going to be the game changer, or maybe a mindset shift.
So I'm going to grab onto the mindset shift, to be honest. Sorry, I jumped in front of you there, Martin. So I think if retail is to continue to grow, particularly in North America, we need to find a solve for the high attrition rate in retail. And unfortunately, in North America, we do suffer from a stigma that retail is a job, it's a stepping stone, and it's not a career. And so the annual turnover rates are astronomical. They're way higher than other industries. And with well over more than half of the workforce changing and being replaced every year, brands are spending millions of dollars every year, huge sums on training of tech that we've talked a lot about. And ultimately, like we've said this before, but retail is the relationship business. And it is defined by how well you're interacting with your consumer and how you're engaging with them. And so we have to find a way to refocus our efforts, I think, on the associate and getting retail fully embedded as part of their career, part of their journey, because tech is not going to replace the human connection in retail, at least hopefully not in my lifetime. And I still think that this shoulder-to-shoulder selling and interacting and all of the trends that we're seeing, even from Gen Zs and Alphas, they want to feel important. They want that person that they're working with, that's serving them, to actually engage with them, to understand them, and to really provide them best-in-class service. That's not going to happen unless we keep the real top talent in retail. And so that would be the area that I think, for me, we need to double down on a mindset shift.
Absolutely. And now that we're brainstorming around thinking, I'll give you two. One where I think I know what could be the case, and the other one, no idea on the answer. But let's think together, right, on how that will come to life. First of all, I think what I see and I believe is that storytelling is making such an important point and an impact in retail, right? We need, as brands, there's a story to tell. Our associates are ambassadors of that story and telling that. And today, I don't think we have leveraged enough digital and tech to enable and take those storytelling and moments to a higher level. And again, I don't mean, to put a goggle and close your eyes and, think that you are in a universe or in the Arctic with a jacket. It's actually going beyond that. So there is, I think, the role of tech and digital that will play to enable the stories maybe with more sensorial experiences where you have wind, I don't know, sand, sound, light will be amazing. So I'm already imagining that. The part that I don't know how, and I of course we don't need to know everything, but if I put, I look into the challenges, fulfillment with more and more fragmented portfolios and shoppers demanding more personalized and specific products. The assortment keeps growing and growing, and the portfolio gets larger and larger. And actually, the stores are getting smaller and smaller and more expensive. So, how do we fulfill that specific product that fits that shopper or that need in that small space that we have? So, drones, 3D printing, I don't know what tech will bring us, but there's an opportunity to connect that immediate need that's very specific with the small space that we're starting to see more and more in retail coming to life as real estate.
I love it. Um, I think my point of view is going to be very complementary to both of yours. So a lot of my work and history has been in software. And so I live in technology. And so I think like many of the groups that I sit within, people are all talking about AI and how it's adopted into their product roadmap, and they have FOMO and what new things are we building. And by the way, that's actually good. Like that's not a negative. I'm not a detractor for that. But what I think this moment in time really needs is I think most teams, most companies, most offerings, they're failing at humaning, and it's showing up in their revenue. And I think when we are talking about generational shifts, and I think we actually just think about like the last 10 years in general, what brings everybody together is we're definitely in a time of disconnection. We're in a time of automation. We're in a time of overwhelming amounts of information. We're in a time of feeling like we as a human are a data point in some algorithm. Most of our communications with fellow humans are asynchronous, right? Whether it's over text or social or Slack or what have you. And what all that creates is like a need, a human need to feel seen, heard, and loved. And then earlier, you talked, Martin, about feeling like you have belonging. And I think that that is really missing for a lot of people, associates, customers, consumers, all of them. And we see it and how people are showing up and the experiences that they choose to adopt to spend more money on, not less money, because they want that authentic community. And so I'm thinking of a retail client of ours who, like historically, they couldn't compete on price, on selection, on convenience. Like that's not really their business model, but they are crushing it. And why? It's because they win on intimacy with their customer. Like they know their customer. And not just because they have all the behavioral data of what the customer's doing, like the way they deliver it is in such a human way. And Martin, you talked a moment ago about like curation and having a lot of product. Actually, what they're finding is because they're not known for having to be able to compete with their competitors for having the biggest selection, but people are also overwhelmed with like, oh, I have so many choices. What do I even pick? I just don't even want to think about it. But because it's so intimate, like this retailer knows how to show their customer, oh, this is what's best for you. I understand all your needs. I understand what point you're at in your life and your journey. Like this is why I think this is the best for you. And again, I think to bring it back to the beginning of the call, I think it's easy to think about CX, about human-centered design as fluffy. It is not fluffy, my friends. It is paying off for this company in real dollars and cents, and they are winning. And I think like using those same principles on your team and your associates, as you were just talking about. So I think it's easy to sit in an ivory tower and say like, gosh, our associates aren't, pushing this new promotion or aren't adopting this technology we want them to do, or darn it, how do we get them to? But like, how do we understand their human and their goals and their incentives? Because frequently those could actually be misaligned with company goals. So going and digging deeper, if you find, we're trying to get somebody to do something and they just won't, there's always a reason. It's your job to unearth it. And so I think for those companies who are getting better at being great humans, building authenticity, like those are the ones that are winning. And in this very tech-enabled world, it's what a lot of people are craving and missing.
I'm sure in so many ways it really comes, the $1 million question is like loyalty. How do we increase loyalty in a way that is true to us? Because there are different techniques out there, different schools, ways of trying to generate loyalty, and it doesn't look uniform. So my last question, because surprisingly we're nearing at time, what's one piece of advice that you would give to your peers that are wanting to think a bit more about design-centric retail? What would you say to them?
I can start, of course, and personally, the best way that I keeping it short with one sentence, one point, when we look into a store experience, is thinking, what do we want people to remember? What do we want them to feel when they come to visit the store? Leaving that as an open question, that will help you to define what is the experience. Do we want them to feel fast service? They're coming home. That will make them feel informed, welcome, pampered, agile, the smart shopper. But if you define upfront that questions, what do we want shoppers to feel and remember when they're in our stores, will make you keep human at the center of everything that you do. And then, of course, you have all the layers with associates. And how do you want the associates to feel when they come to work every day? What do you want them to remember or recommend to others? But that question has opened, at least personally to my team and I, a lot of fantastic and amazing experiences that we developed.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say along the same lines, Martin, is if I had one word of, one sentence of recommendation, it would be walk through your store like you've never seen it before with absolutely fresh eyes. And it starts in the parking lot or in the mall, wherever you are, and walk through your retail store and notice everything and take note of everything. Look at it from the eyes of the consumer, the eyes of the associate, and it is amazing what you will see or actually not see, what you'll notice or what doesn't even cross your threshold. And if you and your store manager and your district manager and whomever it is, I would have individuals on your team do it. Everybody take notes, and it's incredible. You can have a group of people do the exact same thing, but they will all see things differently. And that helps you get into the mindset of your consumer and also into the mindset of your associate. So much of our answers are literally right in front of us, but we just get so used to seeing it the same every day that we sort of can't get out of our own way.
I love that. Plus one to what you both said, I'm going to take it in a little different direction and talk about like what you could do internally as a team, which I think every team should start to build a research and inclusion habit. And I say this because retail is a very human-centered industry. It has been the main talking points for decades, right? That being said, I think most internal teams are not as human-centric as they intend to be. And this isn't like a blanket statement. And I have a tremendous amount of empathy, right? Because everybody's jobs in the entire world, in any industry, like are getting way bigger. We have less time. We're trying to do more with less. We're getting really fragmented. And so there's an aspiration to be really, really close to our customers, our associates, but teams are stretched thin. I think part of the challenge is like you look at this as a daunting project, right? Of like, oh, I've got to go initiate this perfect study or I've got to build this thing. but it's not a box to check. Like it really needs to be a habit. It needs to be continuous. And so what we recommend to teams is like start by building a learning agenda. Like what are all the things you want to know about your customers or your associates? What are your curiosities? What are the risky assumptions you're making? What are you not sure of? Like get that all on paper and then start to build a ritual so you can slowly start to get answers to that rather than say, oh, we're going to get all the answers all in one go, right? But you have to make it an expectation. And by building these tiny habits, you start to build the muscle where it just becomes part of your practice and the entire company starts to adopt it. But what I see over and over is if you don't continue to build that muscle, if you don't adopt it as a habit, it will atrophy, right? It becomes easy to say, oh, well, we kind of know these things about our customers, or we did that one study with that one consultant. I'm a consultant. So like, right. But that is not the only fix. Like this has to be part of your internal regimen and how you think and how you ask questions.
I had to build a common thread with those three answers. It sounds to me it's like, first, be curious, like genuinely be very curious, and then ask the right questions. Center that around how do you want them to feel, your customers, your associates, and then think about how are you building that into your process so that it's just not a one-time exercise. That's so good. We're at time. Thank you so much, everybody. I feel very inspired. I learned a lot, and I just thank you again for this conversation.
Yes, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks for having us.